Got it. Okay, cool. Thanks for all coming tonight. I should apologize in advance. It's toddler bedtime here in my house. So if at any point there is a toddler invasion, I apologize for small toddlers. So I'm going to talk tonight about this type of Roman military find. It's a form of bracelet or armlet that we currently record as armillae, and they are found across the southeast. So first of all, I'm going to give you a bit of background to the project that I've been working on, talk about what is an armilla, then talk a little bit about the previous typologies and the data sources available for this, before moving on to distribution and then sort of looking at decoration and terminal types. So the one on your screen right there, that is a good example from Kent of how these things normally come out the ground. They're normally quite fragmentary, and in this case, this is quite a good example. It's quite a lot of it left. So this is all part of my PhD, which is militaria from non-military sites in the southeast of England. So the counties I'm looking at are all highlighted on the map there. And the project's aim is to, number one, look at the definitions of military finds and objects that we traditionally associate with the Roman army, and examine their distribution across the survey area, and then sort of try and look at why there's so much militaria in the southeast of England. To do this, I divided them into shorthand. So I have core objects and I have periphery objects. Core objects are those that are essential to a Roman soldier's effective role. So objects that he requires on the battlefield, swords, armor, pilum. Periphery objects are those that are less important, or more often than not can be used across the spectrum of society. So for example, spears are, you might think, are a core object, but actually spears, because they're so useful across the wider sectors of society, we fall into periphery. Horse harness material is all periphery material. The idea is to look at whether these objects indicate a military presence or activity or not, or whether they indicate something else. So this grew out of Nikolai's study in 2007 of the Civitas Batavorum, where he looked at returning veterans going home and depositing their arms and armor, and continuity of martial tradition. So is there any continuity of martial tradition that we can look at in the southeast of England using this system? So armilla are a crucial part of this. They are a form of dona militaria. So they're normally issued to soldiers in recognition of doing something special on the battlefield, doing something important, an act of valor. And Valerie Maxfield argued that they're not normally issued above the rank of centurion. So effectively, they're for the ordinary melees, they're handed out as a recognition of valor. Pliny tells us that they're only issued to citizens and that they're not given to foreigners, and that giving them to foreigners is definitely a no. Who Pliny means by foreigners, we're not really sure. In this case, I take foreigners to literally mean the auxilia. So they're not issued to anyone who is not a legionary. It's a practice that originates in the Republican period. They're the talks and armilla that originate from the Gallic influence in Roman awards, and it gets gradually replaced, and by the later centuries you only get a cash donative. The image you can see here is from Xanten. It's a tombstone, and it's a centurion displaying all of his awards. So you have two talks on his shoulders, and at his wrists he has these bands, and we could interpret them a number of ways, but I would like to interpret these as two Armilla, that he's wearing a pair of Armilla, and he's displaying them as well. So his arms are deliberately positioned to show these off. So the original typology for these was developed by Nina Crummy in 2005. Her map is displayed on this screen here. And what you can see is there's a very distinct concentration around the colonia of Colchester and a scattering around the general area, but largely the colonia is the focus. She defined 4 types, A, B, C, and D. These are all based on the band decoration, and I'll show you those in a bit. She identified 52 examples. These are from excavation and from the pads, the Portable Antiquities Scheme. So there are 38 in Nina's collection that were from excavation and 14 at the time that came from the pads finds. Based on the decoration, and she postulated that they were similar to orchestra brooches and military belt plates, and suggested a link using their classical motifs, such as victory palms, and effectively came up with this solution that these were Armilla. They're very, very confined to the UK. There's not very many at all across the channel. So Nina proposed that these were issued to the soldiers as part of the campaign to conquer Britain and the subsequent war that followed. So here are Nina's 4 types. So type A is a double band. So you have this rope decoration that runs around the banding, and in this case you can see there are 2. The top example in the photograph has 2 as well, says type A, and within type A there's a huge amount of variation. So the bands simply, they move apart, they move together. The example in the photograph is by no means the closest that these bands get, but they also can be right out on the edge of the piece. Type B only has a single band running across the middle of it. Finding a good example of type B on the PAS database is quite hard. The example here has quite a bland terminal, but you can see it has a single band of highly stylized rope work that runs across the middle of it. Type C has a triple band. So the bottom photograph, you can see there are 3 bands that run across there, and you've got 3 bands running across in the drawing. Type D also has 3 bands of rope work running around it, but instead of them being evenly spaced as in type C, one of the bands is out on its own. So you have this uneven distribution of the banding. Before I move on, it's important to look at the data source of the Portable Antiquities Scheme. So it records artifacts that are found by members of the public, as I'm sure many of you know. Predominantly, these are found by metal detectorists, so not exclusively. It's only been a national scheme since 2003. So when Nina was drawing her data from the scheme, the national scheme had only existed for 2 years. Prior to that, there were only a few test counties. These were Suffolk, Norfolk, and East Anglia. The reason being is that East Anglia has a very, very deep connection with recording archaeological finds from the public, particularly metal detectorists. And so it was started out there. What this effectively means is that in the data set, there is a very, very heavy bias towards East Anglia. Even today, you can see it if you put all the PAS finds on a map, you'll see that East Anglia glows bright red. So it's important to acknowledge that at the time that Nina created her typology, most of those objects would have been drawn from a PAS that was mainly East Anglia. So this is a new map. So the smaller map pinpoints roughly when Nina Crummy's objects were from, or the original 52. And if you look at the new map, you can see it's quite an expansion across the country. They're no longer centered on the colonia of Colchester. They're spread more across the central belt of England, and they are very heavily concentrated in North Hertfordshire and southern Cambridgeshire. There is a wonderful little outlier down at Springhead, where 14 examples are from, but Springhead is presumably a temple site, or I think it's a ritual site. So you've got this very, very strong concentration actually away from the colonia and above Verulamium. If we break this down further and we look at Group A is by far the most numerous. There are 208 examples of Group A Armilla from this data set. There's 268 examples on that I've when I pulled this group. 208 of them are Group A. Like I said, it's by no means a homogeneous group. The bands move apart, they move up and down at the actual band itself. Again, you can see if you look at the density, they're very, very centered on the Catavalorni around Verulamium and southern Cambridgeshire, with quite a few outliers. Group B bands, however, are much more confined. So when we look at those that have a single band running across, what you have is just this strip that goes across the central belt of England. There's very few that stray south of the Thames. They're very, very concentrated in that area there. 35 of them are Group B, and that's the second most numerous group. Group C and D, Group D, there's just 3 examples that I had found at the time when I pulled this data, 25 Group C types. There's no real discernible pattern in these. They're very much a sort of a scattergun across the survey area. I pulled data for this from all of the PAS recording counties of England and Wales. So where there isn't any, that is a complete absence in a county. So what I'd like to do is propose a small reassessment. There are 268 of these in that data set. Since pulling this data, I myself have added at least 3 more to the PAS database. I know that there are more being found all the time. I would like to propose merging Group C and D. I think that Group D is a subcategory of C. It's simply where the banding has been misspaced rather than any significant thing. There are only 3 examples compared to 25 of Group C. Most of the new examples are recorded by PAS. And something that was never really looked at or hasn't been looked at previously are the terminal decorations. There are at least 16 forms that I have broken down here. A to F and then X is outliers. And within those, you have categories 1, 2, and 3. If we look at the decoration, so originally it was proposed linked with things like orchestra brooches. So you can see there's a lovely orchestra brooch there from Sussex, and there's the Kent example again, and you have this ridging and this sort of ridge and furrow effectively on the bracelet and ridge and furrow on the brooch. There are similarities with early metalwork. Palmate design or feather designs occur on 31 of the 113 surviving terminals. And they mostly appear on Group A. Sorry, skip ahead. So I'm not going to dwell too much on the origins of the decoration, as I know that Michael Marshall is going to publish a paper on talks that has some of this in, and it has been discussed before in Becky Redfern's 2017 paper. There's a very strong link between these Harper Road talk designs and those that are seen on the Armilla. For example, you can see Harper Road has this feathering design, which is a typical Group B terminal. You've got Group A terminal in the sense that there's the ring and dots connected by diagonal lines. Ring and dot is a traditional design that's found throughout the period and into the medieval period. Whether there's a significance or not is yet to be seen. We could also link it to other continental brooch forms. So we need not rely on the orchestra. Yeah, there's incoming brooch forms such as the Langton Down brooches, which are also continental linked. And they have this ribbing and rope work as well. They have a triple bank of it in some cases. So you can see on the image taken from Macreth that there's some good examples of how they compare to these Armilla. So there's a lot of parallels with insular art and with other continental material that's not necessarily military linked. If we look at how these terminals break down, Group A is very, very tightly bound. You can see Group A terminals, particularly Group 1 and 2, they're very, very closely linked within Northern Hertfordshire and Southern Cambridgeshire. A3s, they're the red dots, they're more all over the place though. Again, they do sort of center on that area. Group B, which is the palm design, I would like to argue is more a feather design based on John Cotton's work on Harper Road. I think it's probably more feathers related to Juno. And you can see they're probably the most widely distributed group. Again, like I said, most of these are on type A, Nina Crummy type A bands. If you look at Group C, there's not a lot you can say about Group C terminals, sadly. There are only 8 that exist with good find spot data. There is a nice divide in that their Group C3s are more an Eastern thing and Group C2s tend to be a more Midlands thing, but statistically, it's not a lot you can say about 8 objects. Group D, however, again, you've got a more widespread distribution of these. D1s are certainly more widespread. D2s, which is the double bank of rings, they're more close-knit. Again, they conform a lot more to the Group A distribution, Northern Hertfordshire, Southern Cambridgeshire. E's and F's, again, there's not very many of these recorded with good, decent find spot data. F, which again, I would argue is feather work, not palms. If we were to put that on the same map as the Group B, which is the smaller feathers, they're pretty much in the same area. So, Armilla. Are they Armilla? Their distribution strongly suggests that they're an insular manufacture related to Northern Hertfordshire, Southern Cambridgeshire. If we assume that the focal point of where they were all found is related to where they're manufactured, that would make sense. There's very few that seem to be made of brass. There's no metallurgy really of a wide group. So it would be quite good at some point to do metallurgy of the ones we have to locate whether they are bronze or brass, but they primarily seem to be bronze. There's almost no evidence of niello, which in military metalwork at this time is really, really common. There's very few examples that have silvering or tinning on them. This could just be simply that they've been wiped out over the time, but you'd expect some of it to survive a bit better. There's a lot of them. For a military object that's supposed to be an award given for valor, there's 268 in this data set alone. So there's a lot of these objects. And as the distribution suggests, there's no real link to military sites. They're just sort of across the countryside. We do have some that are precious metal. These are very few in number. There's the 2 silver examples from the Fenwick Hoard. There's 3 gold examples on Paz. When you compare them to the copper alloy examples, none of them have terminal decoration. So you can see on these, they just simply, the rope work goes all the way to the terminal, and there is no decoration on it. Other than that, the gold examples are much narrower. So if you can see on the image there, most of these are less than 1 centimeter wide. The top one is only just over 1 centimeter wide. When you compare this to some of the copper alloy ones, they are a lot wider. They're sort of pushing 2-3 centimeters in width. They also appear to have an adjustable slider. If you look at the silver ones from the Fenwick Hoard, there's a definite, what appears to be like a slide that allows you to adjust their width, compared to these, where having a decorated terminal on both terminals seems rather pointless if one's going to be hidden in a slide. If we look at this, again, the tombstone, and look at his Armilla, you can just about make out on the carving that there is a band that cuts across the Armilla, and I think that is the slide. I think there is his Armilla, his adjustable Armilla that goes up and down depending on where he wants to put it. So what are we looking at? Are we looking at colonists, veterans, local? How can we explain these objects? I would suggest that the precious metal examples are awards. There's much fewer of them, and they're stylistically different. They're different in the way they're designed. The rest of them are very dispersed. So is this evidence for large amounts of land seizure for veterans, particularly around Verulamium and the Fen Edge? Though if you're going to seize lots of land, it would make sense for your veterans to be located near the colonies. There's no concentrations really around the fortresses or later colonies, such as Gloucester, Exeter, or Lincoln. So these colonies are founded just at the end of the use life of these bracelets. You would expect some to be there, and there just aren't very many. You have the style being continentally influenced, but this is true of a lot of metal material produced in Britain at this time. There's a huge amount of continental influence going on even prior to the Roman conquest. We also might expect similar volumes of Armilla related to the later campaigns. Most of these have that are contextualized have good context for the ranging from the 50s to the 70s. Where are all the Armilla for the Agricolan and the Welsh campaigns? Surely we would expect similar designed Armilla to follow on, and for me, there aren't any. So I would like to argue that these are not actually a military object, that they are most likely a locally made bracelet that we've heavily influenced by the new continental styles that are being seen and taken on, and that their distribution reflects a Catavalonian, for want of a better word, concentration, that they're occurring in that area, being manufactured just north of Verulamium, between the Verulamium and the Fens. So thank you very much. I think that's 23 minutes. Cool. Thank you.